Have you ever landed a job you thought would change your life, only to watch it twist into something dark? That's what happened to me. I walked into what I thought was my dream gig, good pay, nice people, a chance to prove myself. But then came the extra work, not the kind you sign up for, but the kind they force on you when no one's watching. It wasn't just tasks, it was a weight that crushed me, a price that ripped me open in ways I didn't expect. This is my story, a tale of pressure, shame, and eventually, waking up. Ever felt trapped by something you couldn't name? Then stick with me. I'm spilling it all, and trust me, you'll want to hear how it ends. If this hooks you, subscribe to the channel, because this is real, and it might hit closer to home than you think. I fought tooth and nail for that job. Can you imagine the rush of finally getting that call, "You're hired"? I'd spent weeks polishing my resume, sweating through interviews, second-guessing every word I said. When they picked me, I felt like I'd won something big. It wasn't just a paycheck, it was validation, proof I could make it. I walked into that office on day one with my head high, ready to show them what I had. Have you ever started something new and thought, "This is it, this is my shot"? That's where I was, naive, hopeful, blind to what was coming. The place felt like a dream at first. My coworkers were friendly, cracking jokes, offering coffee, asking about my weekend. The office buzzed with energy, and I fit right in. My boss. He was the kind of guy everyone liked, sharp, confident, with a knack for making you feel noticed. "You've got potential," he told me early on, clapping me on the shoulder like I was special. Who doesn't want to hear that from the person signing their checks? I soaked it up, worked harder, stayed late just to prove he was right. I wanted him to keep seeing me that way, valuable, capable, worth it. Looking back, I wonder, was that the bait? Did I miss the hook hiding in those words? The routine settled in fast. I'd show up early, tackle my tasks, chat with the team. It wasn't perfect, deadlines piled up, emails never stopped, but it felt manageable. I'd catch my boss watching me sometimes, nodding like he approved. "You're doing great," he'd say, and I'd glow inside. Isn't it funny how a little praise can blind you to what's brewing? I thought I'd found my place, a job where I could grow, maybe even climb the ladder. My parents were proud, my friends jealous, I'd text them pics of my desk, bragging about how lucky I was. Lucky. That word stings now, doesn't it? But it wasn't all rosy, even then. There were hints, small ones I brushed off. A late meeting here, an odd comment there. "You're reliable," my boss would say, leaning a little too close. I'd smile, nod, ignore the twinge in my gut. Why wouldn't I? He was in charge, I was the newbie. I told myself it was normal, part of earning my stripes. Have you ever convinced yourself something's fine just because you want it to be? That's what I did. I built this perfect little bubble around that job, thinking I was safe, in control. But bubbles pop, don't they? And mine was about to burst wide open. If this is pulling you in, subscribe to the channel, because what's coming next changes everything. I kept pushing, kept shining. I'd take on extra projects, volunteer for stuff no one else wanted. My boss noticed, called me into his office one day, shut the door, sat me down. "You're different," he said, eyes locked on mine. "I can count on you." It felt good, like I was standing out. But there was something in his tone, a shift I couldn't place. Was it too personal? Too intense? I didn't dwell on it. Why would I ruin a good thing with overthinking? I left that meeting grinning, texting my mom, "Boss loves me." If only I'd known what "count on you" really meant to him. That's the thing about trust, isn't it? You don't see the cracks until it's too late. It started creeping in slow, like a shadow you don't notice until it's over you. One afternoon, my boss caught me at my desk, end of the day, everyone else gone. "Hey, can you stay a bit? Need a quick favor." His voice was casual, but his eyes weren't. "A favor?" "Sure, why not?" I wanted to be the team player, the one he could rely on. It was just filing some papers, nothing big. But then it happened again, another late stay, another quick thing. Have you ever felt a line blur and wondered if you're imagining it? That's how it began, small, innocent, until it wasn't. The requests got stranger. "Can you run this errand for me?" he'd ask, handing me keys to his car like it was normal. Or, "I need you to double-check this tonight, bring it to me tomorrow." Tomorrow wasn't work, it was Saturday. I'd hesitate, but he'd smile, say, "You're the best at this. Only you can handle it." Flattery, right? Who doesn't fall for that? I'd nod, take the work home, tell myself it was fine. But why did my chest tighten every time? Why did it feel less like a job and more like something else? Then came the shift I couldn't ignore. One evening, alone in the office, he leaned over my desk. "You're really proving yourself," he said, voice low. "Stick with me, and you'll go far." It sounded like a promise, but his hand brushed my arm, too long, too deliberate. I froze. Was that an accident? Did I misread it? I laughed it off, stammered something about deadlines, but my skin crawled. He didn't push then, just grinned and left. I sat there, staring at my screen, heart pounding. Have you ever known something's wrong but talked yourself out of it? I did. He's just friendly, I thought. It's all in my head. The favors kept piling up, and I kept saying yes. Why? Because saying no felt riskier. "You're my go-to," he'd say, and I'd feel trapped by my own pride. I'd stay late, skip dinners, miss calls from friends, all for the job. But it wasn't the job anymore, was it? It was him, his voice, his demands creeping into my life. One night, I got home at midnight, exhausted, and my roommate asked, "Why do you let him run you ragged?" I didn't answer. How could I? I didn't even know what I was letting happen. If this is hitting you where it hurts, subscribe to the channel, because it's about to get heavier. The unease grew, but I buried it. He'd text me after hours, "Need this ASAP," and I'd jump to obey. My friends started joking, "You're married to that job." If only they knew how twisted that marriage was becoming. I'd catch him watching me at work, that same grin, and I'd smile back, weak, unsure. Was I overreacting? Was this just how it worked? I didn't know. All I knew was the knot in my stomach, the quiet dread I couldn't shake. I was in deep, and I hadn't even seen the worst yet. It wasn't subtle anymore. Have you ever watched something shift right in front of you and wondered how you let it get there? One day, he called me into his office, doors shut, blinds down, just us. "I need something special from you," he said, leaning back in his chair, eyes locked on mine. Special? My stomach dropped. It wasn't about files or errands this time. "There's a client dinner," he went on. "I want you there. Not as staff, as my date." His date. The words hung there, heavy, wrong. Was this a joke? A test? I stared at him, mouth dry, waiting for the punchline that never came. He didn't stop. "You're perfect for this," he said, voice smooth, like he was offering me a promotion. "It'll look good for you, trust me." But then came the kicker: if you're not in, well, we might need to rethink your role here. Rethink my role? Can you feel the ground shift when someone pulls a threat like that? It wasn't a request, it was a demand, wrapped in a smile. I stammered, "I don't know," but he cut me off. "You'll do it. I know you will." And just like that, the line wasn't blurred anymore, it was crossed, stomped on, gone. I didn't say no. Why didn't I? Fear, I guess. Fear of losing the job, the paycheck, the little world I'd built. Have you ever felt so stuck you'd rather choke than fight? I nodded, barely, and he grinned like he'd won. That night, I went to that dinner, fancy restaurant, his arm brushing mine, clients laughing like it was normal. I sat there, smiling on autopilot, dying inside. He'd forced me into something I never signed up for, and I let him. How do you even process that? I went home, locked my door, and stared at the ceiling, wondering who I'd become. The extra work wasn't optional anymore, it was my reality. He'd call me his right hand, but it felt more like his pawn. Dinners turned into late-night meetings, errands into personal favors I couldn't refuse. Every time I hesitated, he'd raise an eyebrow. You want to keep this job, right? And I'd cave. Can you imagine hating yourself more with every yes? I did. I was in too deep, tangled in his game, and I didn't know how to claw my way out. If this is gripping you, subscribe to the channel, because it gets darker before it gets better. The weight of it started eating me alive. What's it like to carry a secret that's tearing you apart? For me, it was those extras, things I couldn't tell anyone. He'd have me pick up packages, never saying what was inside, drop them off at weird places, meet him alone after hours. Discretion, he'd call it, winking like we were in on something. But it wasn't a game, it was a leash, and I was choking on it. I'd drive home, hands shaking, wondering what I'd just done, who I'd just helped. Shame was my shadow. Every time I gave in, I felt dirtier. Why couldn't I stop? Why didn't I walk away? I'd look in the mirror and see someone I didn't recognize, hollow eyes, tight jaw, a stranger wearing my skin. I'd tell myself, you chose this, but did I? He'd made it clear, say no, and I'd be out, no job, no references, nothing. So I kept quiet, kept going, kept paying with pieces of myself. Have you ever felt so ashamed you can't even cry? That's where I was, numb, lost, alone. I pulled away from everyone. My coworkers noticed, stopped asking me to lunch, stopped joking around. You okay? One asked once. I lied, yeah, just busy. Busy being his puppet. My family got the same excuse, distant calls, fake smiles. I couldn't let them see the mess I'd become. Can you imagine lying to the people you love just to hide how broken you are? I'd sit alone at night, phone off, replaying every moment I should have said no. But I didn't, and the silence grew louder, heavier, suffocating. My body paid too. Sleep gone, I'd lie awake, heart racing, dreading the next text. Eating barely, I'd force down coffee just to function. My head throbbed constantly, my chest tight like it was caving in. I'd catch myself zoning out at work, missing deadlines, screwing up, things I used to ace. Get it together, he'd snap, like I wasn't already cracking. How do you hold yourself together when you're falling apart? I couldn't. I was paying a price I hadn't bargained for, and it was tearing me wide open. Something had to give. Have you ever hit a wall so hard you can't ignore it anymore? For me, it was one night, after another favor. He'd sent me to some sketchy spot, told me to wait for a guy who never showed. I sat there, in the dark, alone, for hours, until he texted, never mind, go home. Hours wasted, scared, for nothing. I drove back, gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles went white, and when I got to my place, I just sat in the car. That's when it hit me, enough. Can you feel that moment when you're done being someone's doormat? Doubt flooded in right after. Could I really stop this? I had no proof, just my word against his. He'd fire me, ruin me, twist it all somehow, I knew he would. But then I thought, is this worth my life? My sanity? I'd lost so much already, sleep, friends, myself. That night, staring at my dashboard, I realized he wasn't just crossing lines, he was breaking me. And for what? A paycheck? Have you ever woken up to how much you've let slip away? I did, and it burned. That spark of anger lit something. I started questioning everything. Why was I protecting him? Why was I the one suffering? It wasn't normal, none of it was. He'd turned my job into a cage, and I'd let him lock the door. But what if I could break out? What if I wasn't as trapped as I thought? I didn't have answers, just a tiny, stubborn no growing inside me. It wasn't a plan yet, just a feeling, a refusal to keep drowning. I held on to that. The next day, he texted another demand, meet me tonight, and I didn't reply. Not yet. I wasn't ready to fight, but I was done running on autopilot. Have you ever felt a shift so small it still changes everything? That's what it was, a crack in the wall he'd built around me. I didn't know how to climb out, but I knew I had to try. If this is firing you up, subscribe to the channel, because I'm about to take my first step. I couldn't do it alone anymore. Have you ever held a secret so long it starts choking you? That's why I talked. It was a quiet day at work, and I caught my coworker Lisa by the coffee machine. She'd always been kind, the one who'd ask how I was even when I brushed her off. Can we talk? I mumbled, barely audible. She nodded, led me to a corner, and waited. Could I really say it? I took a breath and let it out, halting, messy, true. He's making me do stuff. Weird stuff. I can't stop it. I braced for judgment. Would she think I was weak? Stupid? But Lisa's face didn't change. That's messed up, she said, voice steady. He's a jerk, you don't deserve this. Those words cracked something open in me. Relief? Hope? I don't know, but I kept going, told her about the dinners, the errands, the threats. She listened, didn't flinch, just squeezed my arm. We'll figure this out, she said. Can you imagine what it's like to not feel alone anymore? I could breathe again. Lisa pushed me to see it clear. This isn't your fault, it's harassment. Harassment. That word hit hard, gave it a name, made it real. That night, I dug in, searched online, read about workplace laws, power abuse. Every page screamed what I'd been too scared to admit, he was wrong, not me. What if I could use this? I started saving stuff, texts, emails, scribbled notes from those meetings. Evidence. It felt risky, but right. With Lisa in my corner, I wasn't just surviving, I was plotting. She'd check on me, whisper ideas, tell HR, get it on record. I wasn't ready for that yet, but her belief in me grew mine. Have you ever found strength in someone else's faith? That's what she gave me, a lifeline. I didn't know how far I'd go, but I knew I wasn't staying silent forever. If this is resonating, subscribe to the channel, because the fight's starting now. I couldn't keep bending anymore. Have you ever felt a breaking point turn into a stand? That's what hit me. I'd had enough of his smirks, his, you'll do this, like I was his toy. So I decided, no more. It wasn't a loud decision, just a quiet, hard one. I'd face him. Could I really do it? My hands shook thinking about it, but Lisa's words echoed, he's the one who should be scared. That fueled me. I wasn't just fighting for me anymore, I was fighting for the person I used to be. I prepped like it was war. Every text he'd sent, meet me, don't tell anyone, I saved, printed, stacked up. Emails too, those vague, urgent tasks that weren't my job. I wrote down dates, times, places, every shady errand, every late-night demand. Evidence wasn't just power, it was my shield. What if he tried to flip it on me? I'd be ready. Lisa helped, reading through it all, nodding. This is solid, she said. Solid enough to bury him? Maybe. I clutched that hope tight. The moment came on a Friday. He called me to his office, same closed door, same smug vibe. I need you this weekend, he started, not even looking up. I took a breath, stood straighter. No, I said. He froze, eyes snapping to mine. What? He barked. I'm done, I told him, voice steady despite my racing heart. This stops, or I report it, all of it. His face twisted, shock, then anger. You're bluffing, he sneered. Was I? I stared him down, didn't flinch. Try me. Can you imagine the rush of taking your power back? I felt it right there, small, shaky, but mine. He didn't back off easy. You'll regret this, he hissed, leaning forward like he could scare me silent again. But I'd changed, I wasn't his pawn anymore. I walked out, legs trembling but head high, knowing I'd just lit a fuse. That night, I barely slept, replaying it, wondering if I'd pushed too far. But I'd pushed back, that's what mattered. If this is firing you up, subscribe to the channel, because I'm not stopping now. I couldn't just threaten him, I had to act. Have you ever taken a leap knowing you might fall? That's what going to HR felt like. Monday morning, I walked in, stack of papers in hand, Lisa at my side. My stomach churned as I knocked on the HR door. Could they really help, or would they protect him? The woman behind the desk, stern, no nonsense, motioned me to sit. What's going on? She asked. I swallowed hard and started talking, everything, from the first weird favor to that last confrontation. I laid it all out, texts, emails, my scribbled notes. Her pen scratched as she listened, face unreadable. This is serious, she said finally, flipping through my pile. Serious? That word landed like a lifeline. They'd investigate, she promised, talk to him, dig into it. I nodded, numb, unsure if I just saved myself or screwed myself. What if he twisted it? What if they didn't believe me? But I'd done it, I'd spoken, and there was no taking it back. He didn't stay quiet. That afternoon, he cornered me in the hall, eyes wild, voice low. You think you can ruin me? He spat. Back off, or you're done. My heart pounded, but I held my ground. I already went to HR, I said, calm as I could fake. His jaw tightened, he stormed off. Fear hit me hard, was this retaliation coming? But HR called me later, stay away from him. We're handling it. Handling it. For once, I wasn't alone in the fight. Can you feel the weight lift when someone else steps in? I did, even if it was shaky. They moved fast after that. I got pulled into a meeting, more questions, more notes. We're suspending him pending review, they said. Suspended. Him, not me. I walked out dazed, Lisa grinning at me. You did it, she whispered. Did I? It wasn't over, but it was a start, a real one. I'd turned his game into my stand, and I wasn't backing down. If this is hitting you, subscribe to the channel, because justice is close now. Then came the slog. Have you ever fought for something and still felt stuck in the mud? That's what the investigation was, weeks of waiting, wondering, second-guessing. HR kept me updated, but it was slow, interviews, statements, paperwork. I'd sit at home, staring at my phone, expecting bad news. What if he wormed out of it? What if they let him back? My mind spun worst-case scenarios, but I had my evidence, those texts, those threats, and it kept me anchored. They grilled him, I heard. He denied it all at first, called me a liar, said I'd misunderstood. Misunderstood? Those messages weren't vague, they were orders. Lisa told me whispers were spreading, coworkers piecing it together, some even admitting he'd creeped them out too. My proof held up, HR called it, clear and consistent. Can you imagine your own words turning the tide? That's what happened. Every late-night screenshot, every scribbled note, it spoke louder than he ever could. The hammer dropped quietly. He's out, HR told me one morning. Fired. No big scene, no courtroom drama, just gone. They didn't tell me much, privacy rules, but I didn't need details. He'd lost his job, his power, because I'd fought. Was it sweet? Kind of. But bitter too, I'd paid so much to get here. My hands shook as I hung up, relief mixing with exhaustion. How do you feel when the storm ends but you're still soaked? That's where I was, free, but frayed. winning didn't erase the mess. I'd exposed him, sure, but I'd exposed myself too, my fear, my shame, all out in the open. Some coworkers stared, others avoided me. I'd won, but at what cost? My job felt different now, tainted. Still, I'd done it. I'd turned his control into his collapse, and that was something. If this is resonating, subscribe to the channel, because this isn't just a win, it's a reckoning. Here's where it lands: I survived. Ever wonder what it takes to crawl out of a trap you didn't set? I lived it, forced into extra work that wasn't work, paying a price that ripped me apart. He's gone now, fired, finished, and I'm still standing. Was it easy? No. Was it worth it? Yes. I went from a puppet on his strings to the one who cut them, and that's everything. If you're stuck, pressured, scared, silent, listen, you're not alone. Can you hear that? There's help out there, friends, HR, me right here telling you this. Don't let the quiet protect them, it's your enemy, not theirs. Speak. Fight. And if you're blaming yourself, stop. Who's at fault when someone abuses power? Not you, never you. You've got what it takes to rewrite this, just like I did. I paid a price, sure, but I gained something bigger, me. This isn't the end, it's my start. I'm moving on, scarred but stronger, living for myself now. If this hit you, subscribe, share it, pass it to someone who needs it. We're breaking this cycle together, one story at a time. You're enough. Believe it.